The champagne flute slipped out of my hand and shattered on the dance floor a half second after my son-in-law's palm caught the side of my face. 300 people in the grand ballroom of the Ardenwood Hotel heard the slap before they understood it. I am 67 years old. I've shaken hands with 2 governors and buried the only woman I ever loved. And on the night of my daughter's wedding, a man I had welcomed into my family struck me across the cheek in front of every person who mattered to her. Because I would not hand him the keys to my lake house. I did not hit him back. I did not raise my voice. I bent down, slow, my knees not what they used to be, and I picked up the largest piece of broken glass off the parquet and set it gently on the nearest table so a waiter wouldn't step on it. Then I walked out. I walked through a crowd that had gone dead silent, past my daughter, who would not look at me, and out into the parking garage where my old pickup was waiting. I sat in the cab and I made one phone call. It lasted 40 seconds, and 18 minutes later, when the doors of that ballroom opened again, the people inside turned around expecting a tired old man crawling back to apologize. It was not me who walked in first, but to understand why I had to take a wrecking ball to my own daughter's wedding, you have to back up about 10 minutes to the moment my son-in-law leaned in close, smelling like top-shelf bourbon I'd paid for, and told me what he really thought of me. My name doesn't matter much. Most of my life, people just called me by my last name, or boss, or for a good long stretch, Dad. I built a freight and storage company out of a single beat-up truck and a rented dirt lot outside Kansas City, Tallgrass Freight. I started the year my daughter was born, and I grew it for 38 years until it ran 200 rigs across 9 states. I am not a refined man. I never learned to use the right fork, but I know the weight of $1 because I earned every one of them with my hands before I ever earned them with my name. My wife, Rosalind, was the refined one. She softened all my rough edges. When she died 3 years ago, the cancer took 11 months to do it. And I held her hand at the very end in the bedroom of our lake house at Cedar Hollow, the house she'd planted with hydrangeas and lilacs, the house where her ashes are buried under the dogwood she loved. After she was gone, my daughter became my whole world. She was all I had left of Rosalind. So when she got engaged, I opened my checkbook, and I didn't blink. $300,000. That's what that night cost me. A ballroom at the Ardenwood with chandeliers the size of small cars, a 12-piece band. Lamb and sea bass for $300. Her dress alone ran $22,000, and I paid for it without a word, because I wanted her to feel like her mother was watching from somewhere, proud. I told myself this was the last big thing I'd ever do for her before I handed the company off and got out of everyone's way. I was standing near the bar, nursing a club soda because my heart medication doesn't play nice with liquor, watching her dance with her new husband, when she stopped mid-song, smoothed her dress, and sent him over to me. He came across that floor like a man on an errand, not like a son, like a collector. He leaned in close, voice low and easy, the way he always talked when he wanted something. "Hey, listen," he said. "My folks hate the suite at the hotel. Too small, mattress is bad. They want to stay out at the lake place tonight. I'm gonna need the keys and honestly the alarm code too, so just text it to me." I thought I'd misheard him over the band. The lake house? Cedar Hollow? Yeah. It's just sitting empty most of the year anyway. You're rattling around out there by yourself in, 4 bedrooms? It's wasteful. He smiled when he said it. That was the part that stuck with me. He smiled. I told him no. I told him gently, the way you tell a kid no. I said I'd already booked his parents a beautiful suite downtown, fully paid, and that Cedar Hollow wasn't a vacation rental. It was my home, the place my wife was buried. I said the word buried, hoping it would land. It didn't land the way I wanted. His jaw tightened, and the easy charm slid right off his face like grease off a hot pan. "God, here we go," he said, loud enough now that the couple nearest us glanced over. "Your wife's been dead 3 years. She's a pile of ash under a tree. Why are you hoarding a whole house for a dead woman? It's a little pathetic, honestly." You're one lonely old man holding on to things you can't even use. And tonight, of all nights, you can't do one thing for my family? I have negotiated freight contracts with men who would slit your throat for a better rate. I did not flinch. I said, "Don't you ever talk about my wife like that again." And I reached out, just to move his hand off my arm where his fingers were digging into my jacket. That's when he hit me. The sound of it cut clean through the music. The band stumbled to a stop, one instrument at a time. 300 faces swung toward us. My cheek was on fire, and my ears were ringing. And I stood there in the silence with my own hand pressed to my face like a fool, looking at the man my little girl had married 11 hours ago. And then I looked for her, because some childish part of me still believed that when she saw what he'd done, she'd come running. She did come over, but she didn't come to me. She put her hands on his chest, on his, and she turned to me with her mother's eyes, and out of her mouth came the worst words I have ever heard. "Dad, why do you always have to do this? You couldn't just give him the keys? You had to make a scene at my wedding? You ruin everything." I felt something in my chest go quiet. Not break. Quiet. Like a machine I'd run my whole life finally switching off. I didn't argue. I set down what was left of my drink. I looked at my daughter one last time, and then I turned my back on both of them and I walked out through 300 people who were already deciding I was the villain, whispering behind their hands, watching the rich old man storm off. My son-in-law's voice chased me to the doors. "That's right, walk away. Don't come back without those keys, you hear me? Don't bother coming back at all." I got to my truck. My hands weren't shaking from fear. They were shaking from something colder and harder than fear. Something I hadn't felt since the old days when a competitor tried to muscle into my territory and I had to remind him whose territory it was. I pulled out my phone and I scrolled past my daughter's name, past 40 friends who were inside eating my food, and I stopped on a name I hadn't called in almost 2 years. Delphine Asante. I hired her straight out of law school 22 years ago. A sharp, furious young woman nobody else would give a real shot. I made her general counsel at Tallgrass before she was 35. She is, without exaggeration, the most dangerous person I have ever met, and she would walk through fire for me because I was the only man who ever bet on her. My son-in-law had met her exactly once and called her, behind her back, the dragon. He had no idea. She answered on the second ring. "No hello. It's 9:30 on a Saturday. What's wrong?" "It's family," I said. He put his hands on me. At the wedding. In front of everyone. And she took his side. There was a pause. A single sharp breath. Then her voice dropped into a register I'd only heard a handful of times in 2 decades. "Where are you?" "Parking garage. The Ardenwood. Don't move. Don't talk to anyone." "Do you remember what we built after Rosalind passed? The thing in the vault?" My throat went dry. "I remember. Do you want me to execute sundown?" I looked up at the lit windows of the ballroom, at the people still up there dancing on my dime, certain they'd won. "Yes," I said. "Do it. Bring everything." "I'm 20 minutes out," she said. "Keep your head cold." And the line went dead. Before I tell you who came through those doors, I have to ask you something. If you've ever given everything you had to a child and watched them spend it like it was owed to them, hit that like button so I know I'm not the only one. Subscribe, because what I did next wasn't just anger. It was the most expensive lesson I ever taught anybody. And do me a favor and tell me down in the comments, what would you have done if your own kid stood there and defended the person who just hit you? Now, let me tell you about the vault, and about what I saw on my phone while I was waiting for Delphine to arrive. Sundown was Delphine's idea, born the month after Rosalind died. When I was so deep in grief, I would have signed anything anyone put in front of me. She sat me down at my kitchen table and said, Grief makes good men do stupid things with their money, and it draws sharks like blood in the water. We're going to build a wall. So we did. We wrote a clause into the family trust and the company bylaws both. A clause that gave me, the founder, the absolute and immediate power to claw back every cent, freeze every account, void every lease, and terminate the employment of any family member who acted against my interests or my safety. We had it pre-signed by a judge friend of mine and sealed. We prayed I'd never need it. It sat in a vault for 3 years. While I waited in that truck, I did something I had never done before. I opened the security app for Cedar Hollow on my phone. The cameras I'd installed mostly to watch for raccoons in the boathouse. My son-in-law had been so frantic for those keys. So sure of himself. Something about itched at me. The house should have been dark. It wasn't. Every light was blazing. I pinched the screen to zoom in, my chest tightening with every passing second, and there they were. His family. His father. His mother. His older brother. The one nobody talked about. The one I'd heard had a gambling problem. Standing in my living room. They'd already gotten in. Only 3 people on Earth knew that alarm code. Me, my late wife's housekeeper, and my daughter. My daughter had given it to them. They planned this before the cake was even cut. His father was standing at my bar with a bottle in his hand, and I knew that bottle. It was a 23-year reserve bourbon Rosalind bought me on our trip to Kentucky. The bottle we were saving for our 40th anniversary, a date she never lived to see. He had hacked the wax seal off with one of my kitchen knives, and he was drinking it straight from the neck, laughing, dribbling it down his shirt. I switched cameras to the bedroom, and my hands started to tremble. His mother had thrown open Rosalind's closet, the closet I had never been able to empty, and she was pulling my wife's dresses off their hangers and dropping them on the floor like trash. Then she found the camel coat, the one I gave Rosalind for her 60th birthday, and she put it on. It didn't fit. She forced it anyway and turned in front of the mirror, and the camera mic was good enough to catch her voice clear as day. "Would you look at this?" she said. "Stuffed in a closet for a dead woman." Honestly, it's a blessing she passed. At least now somebody with taste can actually wear it. A blessing she passed. In my dead wife's coat. In my dead wife's room. I've never in my life wanted to hurt another human being the way I wanted to hurt that woman in that moment. But I didn't pick up the phone and scream. I pressed the little red record button instead. I let the camera roll. Because I'd learned a long time ago that rage is useless, but evidence is forever. I found the brother in my study. He'd swung Rosalind's painting away from the wall, and he was going at my floor safe with a screwdriver and the hammer, sweating through his rented tux, prying at the keypad like a raccoon at a trash can lid. Inside that safe was $10,000 in cash and my father's pocket watch, the one I'd meant to give to a grandson I don't have yet. I recorded all of it. Then I saved every file to the cloud, sent a copy to Delphine, sent another to my own email, and I sat back in the dark and felt the last of my grief burn clean away. My phone buzzed. My daughter, calling. I let it ring out. Then a text from my son-in-law. "Stop being a child and pick up. We need the deed to the lake house, not just the keys. This is happening." I almost laughed. The deed. Not the keys for the night. The deed. They wanted the whole thing. So I answered, and I said nothing, and I let him talk. And he talked. He was drunk and stupid and feeling powerful, and he told me everything I needed to know. "Where the hell are you?" he slurred. "You're embarrassing her. Look, here's how this is gonna go. You come back, you apologize to my wife, and tomorrow morning you sign the deed to Cedar Hollow over to us. Because if you don't, I've already talked to a lawyer. We're filing for guardianship. You've been forgetting things, getting confused, getting aggressive. Everybody's noticed. We'll have you declared incompetent and I'll have power of attorney by the end of the month, and then it won't matter what you want. There's a place out past the airport. It's affordable. You'll be comfortable. You won't have to worry about the house or the money anymore. We'll take care of all of it. I asked him, quiet as I could manage, why they needed the lake house so badly. Because my brother's into some people for 60 grand and they're not the patient type, he said. Like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. We sell the lake property, recover his debt, everybody's fine. It's just sitting there anyway. There it was. The whole thing laid bare. They were going to declare me senile, lock me in a state home, and sell the place where my wife is buried to pay off a gambling debt. And he was telling me this, proud of himself, on the night of his own wedding. I leaned my head back against the seat, and I thought about how I'd gotten here. I thought about my daughter at 6, riding on my shoulders, at 16, when I bought her a brand new car after she wrecked the first one, because I couldn't stand to see her sad. At 25, when I bought her condo outright. Every fall I'd cushioned. Every consequence I'd swallowed for her. I thought I was being a good father. I was raising someone who'd learned that other people pay the price for what she breaks. You hear me? He said. Come fix this, or you're in a shared room by Friday. I heard you, I said. My voice came out steady. The chairman's voice. The one I used to fire foremen who stole copper off my yards. Enjoy the party, son. Drink the wine. Dance with your wife, because this is the last party you will ever be invited to. I hung up while he was still shouting. Then I opened my laptop, because there was one more thing I needed to confirm before Delphine arrived. When I stepped back from running Tallgrass day to day, I handed my son-in-law a vice president title and a company card to keep him busy and out of trouble. I never handed over the founder's admin access to our financial system. I built that system. I had a key to every door in it. I followed the money on his company card, and it was worse than I'd let myself imagine. There was a vendor called Birchwood Strategic, a consulting firm getting paid $8,000, $10,000, $12,000 a month. I pulled the registered address. It was his parents' house. A shell company funneling my company's money straight into their pockets. More than $50,000 in 6 months for consulting services that did not exist. There was a $20,000 payment to an entity in another state that turned out to be a casino debt agency. He'd paid off his brother's gambling debt once already, with my money, and his brother had run it right back up. And then, in a folder he thought was safe behind the company firewall, I found a document dated 3 days before the wedding. A promissory note. My son-in-law acknowledging a personal debt of $4 million to my daughter for services and support, a debt designed to take priority over the family trust in the event of a divorce or a death. They'd manufactured a fake debt to drain $4 million out of my estate, tax-free, and route it straight to her. His signature was right there at the bottom. Hers was beside it. She wasn't a victim he dragged into this. Her name was on the paper. That was the moment my hands stopped shaking entirely. I copied the whole folder, backed it up twice, sent it to Delphine with the subject line, everything, and closed the laptop with a click that sounded, in the quiet of that truck, like the lid of a coffin. Headlights swept across the garage. 3 black SUVs, moving in a tight line, pulled up to the curb outside the ballroom entrance and stopped, blocking it entirely. The doors opened and 6 men in dark suits got out, the kind of men who used to do this for a living for the government. And then the rear door of the lead vehicle opened, and a pair of heels hit the concrete. And Delphine Asante stood up, in a charcoal suit sharper than any blade, a leather binder under one arm. She looked across the garage and found me through my windshield, and for half a second her face softened, just enough for me to see the fury underneath. She walked over and opened my door herself. "Show me," she said. I touched my cheek, still hot, the mark of his hand still there. Her jaw went tight. "Let's go inside, boss." She handed me the binder. It weighed 5 pounds. "Emergency conservatorship and asset freeze," she said. "Signed an hour ago. I sent the judge the wire records on the way over. The police are already at Cedar Hollow on a breaking and entering and felony vandalism call. We'll have that footage live in a few minutes. Are you ready? Once we walk in there, There is no taking it back. You're going to take your son-in-law apart in front of 300 people, and your daughter is going to watch. I thought about a blessing she passed. I thought about a shared room by Friday. He made his choice, I said. Now he gets to watch the money fight back. We walked through the lobby like a cold front rolling in. The security men flanking us. The legal team behind. People got out of the way without being asked. At the ballroom doors, I could hear the band had started up again. Hear the bandleader's voice booming. Ladies and gentlemen, back to the dance floor. Let's hear it one more time for the happy couple. Applause swelled inside. I nodded to the two biggest men. They pulled the doors wide open, hard enough to bang them against the walls. The applause died in pieces. 300 heads turned. And there I was again. Only this time, I wasn't a tired old man slinking off. This time I had an army at my back and a judge's order in my hand. My son-in-law was up at the head table with a microphone, glass in hand, a frozen grin on his face. He saw the security men and his grin curdled into outrage, and he came at us fast across the floor. "What is this? You bring goons to my wedding. Have you lost your mind, old man?" He never reached me. Two of Delphine's men simply stepped together and became a wall, and he ran straight into them and bounced off. "Do you know who I am?" he shouted. "I'm a vice president of this company." "Not for very much longer," Delphine said, walking right past him, not even sparing him a glance, straight up the steps to the stage. She plucked the microphone out of my daughter's hand, set her binder on the podium, and faced the room. She tapped the mic twice. The thump rolled through the silence like a death knell. "Good evening," she said, calm as still water. "My name is Delphine Asante. I am General Counsel for Tallgrass Freight and acting executor of the founder's estate. I apologize for the interruption. It won't take long." I watched the recognition ripple through the crowd, because half the people in that room were business folks who knew exactly who she was. I saw a man at table 4 put down his fork and lean to his wife. The whispers spread. "The Ragan, if she's here with a court order, somebody's finished." My daughter found her voice. "You can't be up here. This is my wedding." Delphine turned and looked at her with an expression so cold the girl actually stepped back. "Every flower, every plate of lamb, the dress on your back, the band, this room. All of it was paid for by the man your husband struck across the face an hour ago. The man you both planned to have committed by Friday." She held up a single sheet stamped with the court seal. "As of 15 minutes ago, every account connected to either of you is frozen. The card used to hold this venue has been canceled. The payment for this entire event has been reversed." She looked toward the back of the room, where the hotel manager stood gripping his radio. "Sir, the check for tonight has bounced. Unless someone here has $300,000 in a personal account, I'd stop pouring the champagne." The room came apart. Waiters froze. The manager started speaking fast into his radio, and then Delphine reached for the projector cable hanging off the podium, the one meant to play their honeymoon slideshow, and plugged in her tablet. The big screen behind the stage lit up. It showed the ballroom security footage. It showed my son-in-law leaning into me. It showed me stepping back, and then it showed his arm draw back and his hand snap forward, and my head whip sideways, 20 feet tall, in front of everyone who'd been told I was a drunk old man who made a scene. A gasp went through 300 people at once. The whole story flipped in a single second. Then she swiped the screen, and it changed to a shaky, full-color body camera feed. Red letters at the bottom reading live. It was my living room at Cedar Hollow. Police everywhere. His father face down on Rosalind's rug, hands behind his back screaming about the bourbon he'd been drinking. His mother, hysterical, still wearing my dead wife's coat, an officer reading her rights over her shrieking. His brother being dragged out of my study, a pry bar clattering on the floor. The whole room watched it in horrified silence. They saw the looters. They saw what they'd been celebrating. My son-in-law stared up at that screen, all the blood gone from his face, and his knees buckled. He grabbed the edge of the stage to keep from going down. He understood now. He knew that I knew everything. I walked up the steps and Delphine handed me the microphone. "You wanted the deed," I said to him, and my voice filled that quiet room. I pointed at the screen, where an officer was stretching yellow tape across my front door. "The police have my house now. It's a crime scene. If you want to see it, I'm sure they'll let you visit, right after they finish booking your parents." I turned to him directly. "You used company money to pay your brother's debts. You routed $50,000 to your parents through a fake company. You forged a $4 million note against my estate, and my daughter signed it. You are not my son-in-law anymore, and you are not an employee of mine anymore. You're fired. Effective tonight. The truck I gifted you is a company lease, and it's already on a flatbed in the garage. The condo you live in is in my name, and you have 24 hours. He dropped to his knees right there on the stage. "Dad, please," he sobbed, grabbing at the cuff of my pants the way he never grabbed at anything in his easy, gifted life. I was tricked. She pushed me into all of it. I didn't mean any of it. "Please, I'm family." "You're a grown man," I said. "Nobody made you raise your hand to me. Nobody made you sign that note. You looked at me, your wife's own father, and you didn't see a man. You saw a wallet that wasn't dying fast enough. I can forgive a mistake, son. I can't forgive that." And then my daughter started screaming at him. Not at me. At him. "You said you had it handled. You said he was senile. You said it would work." She ripped at the 4-carat ring on her finger, the one I'd paid for, and when it finally came off, she hurled it at his face. It bounced off his cheek and skittered across the floor. "I'm not going to be married to a broke felon. I'm done." She gathered up her dress and ran out barefoot, leaving her shoes where they fell. There was one person who didn't run and didn't gloat and didn't beg. My granddaughter, Maddie, 16 years old, my daughter's girl from before any of this, the one he treated like furniture in his own house. She came across that emptying ballroom while everyone else was fleeing toward the exits, and she put her arms around me and held on, and she whispered, "I'm so sorry, Grandpa. I always knew. I always knew what they were." And I held my dead wife's only granddaughter in the wreckage of that party, and I felt, for the first time in 3 years, that I was not entirely alone in the world. I didn't look back at my son-in-law on his knees. Delphine took my arm and Maddie took my hand, and we walked out through the silent crowd, past $300,000 of lobster going cold and out into the night air, which was sharp and cold and the most honest thing I'd felt all evening. A week later, I sat across from Delphine in a quiet little diner on the west side, eating roasted chicken off a plate that cost $9. And it was the best meal I'd had in years. She slid her phone across to me. The damage report. His parents were facing felony charges and would lose their house to pay for the wine and the antiques they destroyed in their rage when the police hauled them out. His brother had run back to the people he owed, and that was no longer my concern. And my former son-in-law was working a double shift at a chain restaurant out by the highway, living in a shared room, learning at 31 what it feels like to be on your feet for 10 hours for people who don't care if you're tired. My daughter filed for divorce within 48 hours. She has tried to call me 11 times. I haven't answered yet. I don't know if I ever will, but I left that door cracked just barely because she is still her mother's daughter, and because Maddie needs her mother to find her way back to being a decent person. That's not for the courts to fix. That's hers to earn. Delphine pulled one last document out of her bag and laid it on the table between the salt and pepper. A simple blue folder. "It's all set up," she said. "Just needs your signature." The Roslyn Foundation, the money that was supposed to be my daughter's inheritance, the $4 million they tried to steal and everything behind it, going instead to trade scholarships, welding, diesel mechanics, electrical, the kind of work I did with my own hands before I ever wore a suit. For kids who have grit and nothing else. Kids who know what a dollar weighs. Maddie's going to help me run it when she's older. She wants to. I uncapped my pen and I signed my name, and I felt the future of my family move out of my own blood and into my own values. At 67, most men are looking backward, counting their days. But sitting in that diner, I didn't feel like I was ending anything. I felt like I was finally setting down a weight I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it wasn't part of me. I'd spent 40 years saving a child from every fall, and in doing it, I'd taught her she would never have to stand on her own. The hardest, truest love I ever showed her was the night I finally let her hit the ground. I lost a daughter and a son-in-law, and a house full of memories that the police are still cataloging as evidence. But I kept my dignity, I kept my company, I kept a granddaughter who chose me, and I found a few thousand kids I'll never meet, whose lives are going to be different because one stubborn old man finally learned how to say no. Sometimes you have to let the people you love most lose everything so they can learn what they're made of. And sometimes you have to be brave enough to let go of them entirely. When you finally understand they were the ones holding your head under the water. I let go, and for the first time in a long, long time I came up breathing. The thing I keep coming back to is that none of this fell out of the sky. Every piece of that night was a seed somebody planted years earlier, and the wedding was just the harvest. My son-in-law raised his hand to me because I had spent 40 years teaching my daughter that consequences were for other people. I paid for the wrecked cars and the condo and the rescue at every turn, and what I called love was really just me robbing her of the chance to ever stand on her own. You reap what you plant, even when you planted it with good intentions. Especially then. I've had a lot of quiet mornings out at Cedar Hollow since, sitting under Rosalind's dogwood, and I've decided there are 3 things I wish I'd handed my daughter instead of money. The first is a backbone for doing right when nobody's watching, and it costs you something. Tiffany's parents drank my reserve bourbon and wore my dead wife's coat because somewhere along the line, nobody ever made them feel the weight of a wrong choice. Character isn't what you do when it's easy, it's what you do when you think the cameras are off. Turns out the cameras are never as off as people believe. The second is good judgment. The plain horse sense to look one move past what you want and ask what it actually costs. My son-in-law thought he was the smartest man in that ballroom. He never once read the paperwork he was spending. He mistook my kindness for weakness and my silence for surrender. And a sharper man would have known that the quiet ones are the ones you watch. Smart isn't the diplomas on your wall. It's knowing what game you're actually in. And the third is grit. The willingness to earn a thing the slow, unglamorous way. The kids I'll never meet, who get a Rosalind scholarship to learn welding or diesel repair, already have more of it than my daughter did at 30 because they know what a dollar weighs when you stood 10 hours to make it. That's the part you can't gift somebody. You can only get out of their way and let them build it themselves. One hard day at a time. If you take one thing from an old man who lost almost everything in a single night, let it be this. Be the person who does right when it's expensive. Think 2 moves ahead of the people counting on your weakness. And never let anyone, not even your own child, talk you into believing that saving them from every fall is the same as loving them. Sometimes the most loving thing in the world is to step back, let go of the cuff of your trousers, and trust that the ground will teach them what you never could. I let go. And we are both finally standing on our own feet.